Hi everybody, welcome to my gouache painting class about how to paint this beautiful scene of Kailua. Kailua is on the windward side of Oahu, and there's a beautiful bay. This is Kailua Bay, and this view is taken, I took this photo from the east side of the bay, and it's looking back out towards Kailua Beach. It's a really special spot. You can snorkel here, and turtles come up to that little sandy cove to rest sometimes, which is really fun to see. What I thought would be good about painting this as a lesson is that I want to show you how to create a really strong foreground. So looking at the picture, all the beauty in the photo is in the bay, and there's a little bit of beauty in some of the lava rocks, but there's enough information here to create a strong and very painterly foreground. And so I want to show you how to do that with gouache paints. I've drawn some lines here, and these lines are lines that I'm going to paint thick brush strokes on of big bold colors, and we're going to take the viewer across these lines. These are also called construction lines, and we're going to take them first to this little sandy cove beach, and then over here to this little area where the water's very shallow, and it looks like you could step in and make your way out past these rocks, maybe look in a tide pool or two, and go for a swim out here in the bay. So this is the center of interest, the bay. And usually in most paintings, landscape paintings and seascape paintings, the center of interest is somewhere in the middle ground. So this whole area here, the little cove beach and the small tide pool area and these rocks, this is all the foreground. And so from all four sides, from these two sides and the bottom, we want to make sure that our brushwork takes the viewer into this beach over here, out through the rocks, and they get to take a look at Kailua Bay. And the clouds are coming down, you know, from the upper right and upper left-hand corners in towards the mountains also. So it's a really nice setup for a painting like this, and gouache is a great medium for creating strong foregrounds. So to start with, I'm going to use my 3/8 inch black velvet oval brush. And we're going to start right off with the foreground, and we're going to make some beautiful greens, starting with cyan blue and yellow, and also some titanium white. And I'm going to make a big bold brush stroke just like that, so painting right across the lines. Now I'll grab some turquoise and some lilac. I'm going to make a whole variety of greens in the center and around the edges, picking up some more lilac. And now some yellow. I picked up deep yellow this time. So I'm just adjusting the colors as I go across the front. Now I'll get some more titanium white, and this time some lemon yellow. We'll make the green a bit brighter. Now these greens are still pretty grayed down. They're not super bright. That one's pretty bright. But it's more about the lines and how I want the lines to take the viewer in towards the beach. Now I'll get some regular yellow. And some lemon yellow. Now I'm going to get Naples yellow, and I'll bring some nice strokes from the lower left in towards the beach. So I've got the Naples yellow, the beachy color on this side, because I'm planning to have the tide pool colors here. I wouldn't want to use this shade of green on this side because it's too close to the color that we're going to be using for the beach. Now I'll make some really bright greens. I'm using cyan and lemon yellow. That's about the brightest green you can make with this palette. And I'll put a few brush strokes of that Oops, I want it to be a more yellow. A few brush strokes of that right over here. And on the hillside on the left, it's really green. So I've picked up some more regular yellow, mixed it in with my green mixture. This is a great painting to practice mixing greens. Now to emphasize the greens, I'm also going to put in some subtle grayed down red. So I'm using vermilion and Naples yellow. And I'm going to put those colors in right here. And I'm going to make it slightly more grayed down with some ultramarine blue, making it more of a violet. So we've got a really nice painterly foreground. And remember, the job of the foreground in any landscape painting is to capture the viewer's attention and then take them wherever you want the eye to go. All right, next up we're going to make this beautiful beach color. So I'm going to use Naples yellow plus a tiny amount of vermilion and titanium white. If you don't have Naples yellow, you can mix your titanium white with any of your yellows and a little bit of red. So Naples yellow is a color you don't need to have, but it just makes painting and mixing colors a little bit easier and faster. So I like to keep it around. So painting the nice beach. Now I've extended the beach slightly over to the right, and I'm painting through my foreground. I plan to paint over that later. We're just blocking in these big shapes right now, big color shapes. Now I want to start working on this little sea cove, and I also want to paint the shadow color here under the rocks. And there's a cast shadow from the rocks onto the sand, but I'm going to wait till that dries before I start to paint that. Okay, so for the Cove beach, we're going to go with cyan and titanium white and Naples yellow. That makes a beautiful tropical green. And we're going to put that in here. Now with more Naples yellow, I'm going to make some of it a little lighter and greener. And now with some lilac, I'm going to put some lilac in here also. If you look closely at the water, you'll see some bits of lilac and little bits of yellow and beige and turquoise. And it's just because there's a combination of rocks and sand and shells and things under the water. And instead of it being just a flat turquoise like the ocean is beyond it, you get a nice variety of colors. So I just picked up some turquoise green. I'm putting that in here. Now I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to mix up ultramarine. I'm going to mix it right into this color mixture here, and some black intenso and magenta. And I'm drying my brush off a little bit because it's gotten too wet, and I'm going to mix some of those colors. Oop, that's too dark. I'll mix it with the other turquoise mixture. I'm just going to put a few brush strokes of that in here just to show that there's some rocks underwater. And then we're going to brush back over those, because unless we soften the edges and go back over them, they won't look like they're underwater. They'll look like they're on top of the water. But we're going to wait till that dries. Okay, so black intenso. Now we'll start working on some of these rocks on the side. These big sea rocks here. Beautiful lava rocks. And I know that these rocks have brown on top, but for now we're just blocking in the big shapes with this deep black color because we're working with gouache and we can paint over the black with lighter colors. We're going to paint right up to the beach and right out here into our beautiful cove. Okay. Oh, I forgot a couple rocks out here. I want to add a couple rocks right here. Okay, so while that's drying, I want to come over to the left here and paint that deep shadow color under the cliff. So I'm mixing ultramarine and magenta. And I'm painting that in here. And then adjacent to that, underneath here, this shadow is cast by this cliff onto the sand. So we're going to add titanium white to the same mixture and a little more ultramarine blue and also some vermilion. We need to have it grayed down a bit, and we're going to put that cast shadow in right through here from the cliff. Beautiful. Now we're going to add some red to that, some of the vermilion, and some more white, and some deep yellow. And there's some pretty rocks here on the side. Look at that gorgeous earth color. This is why I don't have earth colors on my palette. I can make more beautiful earth colors using vermilion and deep yellow than if I were to just squeeze out burnt sienna right out of the tube. This is much nicer. Now there's a few rocks out here also that have that pretty golden brown color. So while I've got it on my brush, I'm just going to put a few of those rocks in. And I'll vary it a little bit. So I've just added some more deep yellow. I'm kind of getting some nice textures because my black is only partially dry. So that's actually working nicely. Getting some marbling. Marbling is what happens when your paint isn't completely mixed on the palette and it mixes a bit right off your brush and onto your paper, your canvas. That's called marbling. And it's something I really like. Now, just because this is gouache, I'm going to get some vermilion and I'm going to make a couple more brush strokes here of this pretty red. And just paint that in here. And that's a really nice, like an attention grabber. And I'm going to mix it in with some of the black. And value creates dimension, even if it's only 1 or 2 shades of value apart. And I'm going to go over the black rocks with just a few kind of loose painterly brush strokes of this lighter brownish gray, leaving lots of black in between. And I'll put some over here also. Okay, so now I want to go back to the cove and I want to paint some brush strokes perpendicular to these dark strokes to make the rocks look like they're underwater. So I'm going to mix Naples yellow and turquoise. And I'm going to make some pretty brush strokes like this. And again, you want to have not too much water on your brush. You want to have a small amount of water because you want the paint to be opaque enough that it can just roll right over the dark shapes. And give you a variety of like really beautiful edges. Make it look like the water's flowing. Really gorgeous. Now if you'll notice where the water comes up to the sea rocks, it becomes a deep, deep violet blue. So to make that color, we're going to mix ultramarine blue and titanium white and a very tiny amount of magenta. So there's ultramarine blue and titanium white. And we still need a little more and a very tiny amount of magenta because magenta is a really strong color. And we're going to put some of that, maybe a little more blue. It's got to be a deep color. Okay, so in between these dark rocks are some places where you can see blue, this bright blue, because the water is reflecting the sky and some of it is just where it's in shadow. And we're going to put some of that over here and also back here. Anywhere where the water comes up to the bottom of the rocks, we want to put this pretty bright ultramarine mixture with a touch of magenta. You see how that's helping it look more three-dimensional because there are light and shadow even among sea rocks. And I'm bringing a little bit of that violet down into the foreground also. So lines flatten out as they go back in space. So the further out you go with this violet, in other words, this is the foreground, the further back you go, the more flat the line should be of this color. What I want to do next is put down this pretty turquoise color for the background water, and we're not finished with the foreground yet, but I want to try to get most of our big shapes going. So I'm using turquoise and cyan together to get a really strong, luminous, bright blue. And depending on your colors, if you want to add some white to this, you can. But I'm going to start with this nice bright color. And what I want to do is paint beautiful stripes of this color in different hues. So now I'm going to pick up some white and some Naples yellow and some more turquoise and just change it slightly. Because if you look at the photo, there are stripes of different colors going through the water. Now I'm going to pick up some ultramarine and some magenta. And so to keep it harmonious and so that the stripes aren't too different from each other, I'm using one color and then I'm mixing other hues into it. Now here is some violet, so we'll put that in here also. And I lightened it with some white. And I'm going to add some more magenta. I'm going to come down pretty close to the sea rocks. And I've added some more white to the same color. And if you look at the photo, it seems like the water over towards the left does have some violet through it. Now we'll be changing it again. I'm going to add more turquoise and some lemon yellow and some titanium white. And we'll make this a bit brighter over here. So I'm being careful to just paint around my sea rocks. Adding some more white and some yellow. This time I used regular yellow. That yellow doesn't have a special name. It's just called yellow. It's the yellow that comes with the set, and I love it. That's the set of Royal Talon's gouache colors. And I'm gonna make a bit of turquoise in here too. I kind of want to break this up with some brighter turquoise mixed in with this violet. I think that looks good. Now, like with any other paint, you want to squint down and hop up every once in a while and take a break and look at your work and make sure you're happy with how it's looking. So I want to put the beach in next, and that is, at this point of the painting, is going to be very simple. Naples yellow, a little bit of magenta, and a tiny bit of ultramarine and titanium white. It's a little too gray, so I'm going to add more titanium white and some deep yellow. So a lot of times in seascapes, the distant shoreline appears to be, the beach appears to be really skinny, and I tend to make it a little bit bigger, a little bit wider than what's in the photograph. It just looks better to me. So when you paint the beach, and you do want to paint right up to the line of turquoise, and we'll put a little bit of wave action over that later on. So there's our beach. Now, before we go on doing anything else with the rest of the painting, I want to do some more things to the foreground. So I'm going to mix titanium white, lemon yellow, and some vermilion. You want to make sure when you're painting one color over the next with gouache that you don't have too much water on your brush. You really want the paint to sit on top and not even soak into the layer below it. So I'm just adding some plant leaves, some bright greenish yellow colored leaves. So I'm adding some more cyan and white and deep yellow just to change the green a bit. I'm going to make some bright colors like that, and then I'm going to pull the lines back towards the corner. Now I'm going to mix more red with my green. So I'm using vermilion. We have these nice big shapes, these interlocking shapes, and I want to have some of the foreground overlapping the background. So vermilion and turquoise green. And I'm going to put some of those strokes right here. I purposefully want to have some pinks and reds in some of these brush strokes here in the foreground where it overlaps the tide pool area, well, the little cove here, because there's a lot of green in that. And we're going for a painterly look. So I'm still using my oval brush, and I'm going to make some bright streaks of pink and red along my construction lines and right across the foreground here. Just like that. Now, I'm going to add some white to that same pink and put a few brush strokes of that here in the foreground on the left side. So we really already have a really nice array of colors. In our foreground. So what I'd like to do now is also with the rocks, I want to paint some of the black part of the rocks up over the water behind them. So I'm picking up black Intenso and I'm going to add magenta to it. I kind of like to treat black as if it's a blue and then add other colors to it to give it a little bit of tone and temperature. So you can cool it down by adding ultramarine, or you can warm it up by adding magenta. So just painting small brush strokes of this nice tinted black over some of the rocks and just redefining their edges where they're in front of, from this point of view, where they're in front of the water. I'm going to put a few extra marks of the same black within my dark shadow shape just to emphasize the shadow a little more and also to put some detail within the shadow shape. And I'm going to put a couple of small brush strokes down here where the rocks meet the sand just to give that a little nice transition and texture. I'm just going right around these little bits of blue. And I'm going to put a couple of these rocks. So I've got these dark shapes of brush strokes that show the rocks that are underwater. And now I want to paint a couple of the rocks as if they're partially underwater and partly above water. So I'm just adding some of the dark black on top to show where they're above water. And then underneath the water is where they're the lighter color. And we'll put a transitional color between the light and the dark. I'll use ultramarine blue and titanium white just to show a little water movement around those rocks. I'm going to continue over here, making a few more brush strokes with Naples yellow and lemon yellow, cyan, and vermilion. So I made a very light gray green, and I'm going to put a few textural brush strokes right along the edge of where this little grassy area overlaps the beach. So where I go, when I get to this section here, where it's right up against the cliff, I'm going to make those brush strokes brighter. So Naples yellow, lemon, and titanium white, because this is not the same color as the shadow, but it's the same value almost. And so you have to have light over dark or dark over light when you create separation. So I want to have a few brush strokes like this overlapping the shadow area. So I'm going to go back now and pick up more white, more lemon, and more Naples. And I'm just going to lighten this ever so slightly more. Put a few more there, here. And now I'm going to put some more green at the top of this little hillside. So I picked up more lemon and more cyan. And I'm going to block that in right like that. And get a little more yellow. Okay, so our foreground is starting to look really good. One more thing I want to do before we move on to do the trees and the sky and the mountains is I want to put a few brush strokes here of violet to add some texture to the sand. It looks a little empty. So I mixed titanium white, ultramarine blue, and some vermilion. And then I'm just going to make some small brush strokes. Nothing too intricate. Just want to give some texture to the sand by adding a color that is similar to the sand. So this is like a pinkish gray, which is not too far off from the beige that's there. And a value that's about 2 value shades apart from the sand. And a couple of little darker marks. So I just took the same color and mixed a little bit of black into it. And I'm not going to put much, just a little, just to emphasize the texture a little bit more. There. That looks good. A couple more marks here. Okay, now we're ready to start painting the trees in the distance. So if you have a look at the photo, you can see that the green in the trees in the distance is much grayer than any of the greens in the foreground, even though in the picture the grass is kind of dried out on this little grassy area. We've made it brighter and greener. The greens on this side over here are pretty close to what we have, although we should put some darks in there in a little while. But the main thing I want you to realize is that this is the foreground, so we have the full range of colors at our disposal. And then when we move into the middle ground, colors get grayer as they go back in space. So these greens are going to have to be grayer, and we want to do that because we want to create the illusion of distance on our paper. And so in order to make them grayer, we have to add some of the complement. So the complement to green is red. So let's mix up some green with cyan and lemon, and we'll add some vermilion to it. And that should be, yeah, that's a nice grayed down green. And we're going to come right down onto the sand. And where we get close to the sand, we're going to make it look like it's in the shadow. So we're going to use ultramarine and magenta. We're going to have a nice dark color at the base of these trees. So that'll show light and shadow, and some of these darks will come up in between the trees, and so that'll give the trees some dimension. And we'll also give them some highlights too, but we'll do the base color first. These trees are really beautiful. They're called ironwoods. And if I remember right, they were imported from Australia to Hawaii. The only bad thing about them is that they drop these really hard little pine cones. And if you're walking barefoot on the beach and you step on them, they really hurt. But the wind makes a wonderful sound when it blows through the ironwood trees. So the trees are closer here and they're further away here. So I'm going to make the trees taller here, and they're slowly going to get shorter as they go further back. And we'll go all the way to the end of the beach. There. And then we'll put some on this side. Okay, so now we'll put some highlights on the trees. So we're going to use lemon yellow, and even though these are highlights, they're still going to be a grayed down green because they're in the distance. So a highlight doesn't necessarily mean a brighter color. It does mean a lighter color. Okay, so here we are. I mixed some titanium white, some vermilion, some cyan, and some yellow deep. And I'm just going to go across here with this nice highlight color. So continuing on with our highlight color for the trees, adding a bit more vermilion as I go even further away. And I'm going to put some nice highlights up here also. This time I'll add some magenta. And I'm letting the colors just flow a little bit. The dark color is still kind of wet, so I'm getting really nice flowing edges. I'm going to mix ultramarine blue and magenta, mostly blue and a little bit of magenta, and I went ahead and mixed it into a little bit of the black. And I'm going to paint some of these tree shadows on the beach. They come down at an angle. Some of them come all the way down to the water. So I got a little spot of the shadow color right there in the water. And it's good that that happened, because that gives me an opportunity to show you how to fix that if you get a spot of paint where you don't want it. I don't like making mistakes, but I think it just creates another opportunity for me to teach you something else. I'm going to bring some of this color up a bit higher into the trees. In between the trees, just to give them some more dimension. Now I'm going to get Naples yellow and titanium white. I'm going to brighten the beach. So I made some semi-vertical lines with these shadows. They're kind of at an angle, and now I want to brush over them with a lighter color, and I'm brushing over them and around them. Just want to soften my edges a little bit, and at the same time doing that, I'm also lightening the beach, which I decided I wanted it to be a little bit lighter than it is. Now I'm going to get some plain titanium white, and I'm going to make a few marks across the water here, just to show a little wave action. They're more like straight broken lines that just indicate a little bit of surf, gentle waves kind of rolling into the beach. And it helps transition the beach to the water in a way that looks more natural, and the waves are bright and pretty. So you notice I didn't use plain white, I tinted it with a little bit of magenta. I'm going to add some blue to that same white, and I'm going to go around some of these rocks here and add some little bits of water, just kind of splashing up around the rocks. So I'm making lines like this and small dots. It's kind of a stylized way to indicate the water. Here we are, just a few. And we'll put some in the rocks like that. The next thing I want to do is start working on the sky and the mountains in the distance. I'm going to go ahead and do the sky first. So we're going to make the color of the darkest part of the clouds first. So ultramarine blue and magenta plus Naples yellow. A little more magenta. You can use vermilion or any red too. You just want to get a 3-color gray with Naples yellow or some yellow and white and a red and a blue. So those are the colors I've chosen. So I'm going to just make some kind of loose brush strokes. I'm looking at the photo and just kind of looking at my drawing and just making some nice, beautiful brush strokes, trying to emulate clouds. And these are the outer edges of the clouds. So we're going to put this color down first. And I want to have this, kind of lofty island cloud movement. And we'll put this color down first, and then we'll put the lighter color of the clouds, and then finally we'll put the blue sky in after that. If you want to give the viewer the sense of looking up at the clouds, you might want to put some of the dark cloud color at the top, either in the upper right-hand corner or upper left-hand corner, or both. That kind of gives the viewer the feeling of standing under the clouds a little bit. Now I'm going to get titanium white and Naples yellow. And some vermilion, and I'm going to go inside these shapes, these dark shapes. I've got a little too much water. You see how you can see through there? You can see through to the dark too much. I need more paint and less water. Okay. So I'm leaving the outline of the dark shape, and I'm putting the light shape in a very loose way. And there's going to be a bit of going back and forth, creating these clouds and sky. But this is how we start. So value creates dimension. And clouds have dimension too. Before we go into the clouds anymore, I'm going to start putting the sky in. So I'm going to use cyan and ultramarine, both blues, plus titanium white. And I want to make sure that the sky blue is lighter overall than the blue in the ocean. So the sky should always be the lightest overall big shape in your painting. So I always start the skies from the top and I bring the color down. And then just work my way down through the clouds, down to the horizon. I really like the way that this is looking. It's really painterly. So more titanium white, and now I'm going to add a little bit of Naples yellow so it gets lighter and it's slightly warmer as it comes down closer to the horizon. So the sky has a really nice, kind of fresh, immediate feel. It even feels a little bit windy. Now we'll put the mountains in, this distant coastline here, and then behind it there's just a hint of the mountains showing up behind the trees. So we'll put those in first. So I'm using ultramarine, titanium white, and magenta. Need a little more magenta. I'm painting around my trees. And I'm working my way across. Now don't worry about painting around your trees and worrying about whether they look like trees or not, because we're going to come back in and work on the tops of the trees in a little while. This is a layering process. Gouache paintings look really good when they're layered. I'm going to add some more titanium white to this color because the mountains fade a little bit as they get further away, and to the right side of the photo they are a bit further away. Just kind of rolling my brush a little bit there. Did you see how I just turned that? Makes a nice edge. Now in front of these mountains, there's some green hills. So I'm going to use turquoise green, deep yellow, and Naples yellow. And of course I'm going to add some vermilion because I have to tone it down because it's a distant green. Now I'm going to give those hills a bit of dimension also, so I'm going to take Naples yellow and work that into the same color mixture and add some more vermilion. And I'm going to put some highlights on the mountain just to show that there's light and shadow going on and that they have texture. And then down here at the base of those mountains, there's a really dark line of more of those ironwood trees. So I mix ultramarine, magenta, and vermilion. And having this dark back here also helps balance this side of the painting so that you've got some darks on this side as well. Okay, so now I want to work on the top of the ironwood trees. So I'm going to put some more highlights. But even if they were left like this, they still have a good amount of dimension and the painting still looks three-dimensional because there's enough separation between these two colors. But I want to give it a little more. So I'm going to layer and just put some nice highlights throughout here. And you see how my brush strokes are? Really loose. I'm not trying to make a tree necessarily. I'm just playing with shapes and expressive brush strokes to make the trees look three-dimensional. And I'm going to get some yellow, some deep yellow, and some more vermilion. And the trees that are slightly closer, I'm putting some more of this yellow color, kind of a deeper yellow. I'm just blending that edge with a tiny amount of water. Now I'm going to mix ultramarine blue, deep yellow, and some vermilion. And I want to re-emphasize a few of the darks where this tree comes up above the mountains and it's in silhouette with the sky. I'm just putting a bit of that color through here too. So I added some fresh white paint to my palette, and I'm picking up some of that nice bright white, and I'm going to mix some Naples yellow with it, a little bit of vermilion, and I'm going to give my clouds a little more dimension. So I'm adding some brighter white into the middle section of some of the clouds. And then I'm going to extend some of that white out into the sky where it's blue. Keeping my brush strokes really fresh, really loose. I want to keep that lofty, free feeling in the sky. Now I'm going to get some ultramarine and I'm going to mix it in with that same white mixture that's left. Plus I just added some magenta. And that's not dark enough. So more vermilion and magenta. I want to paint a few brush strokes of a nice violet gray. These clouds are part like shades of white and then shades of violet gray. And I want to paint both things, both colors in the sky. So be careful at this stage. I have to be careful too that I don't make too many small brush strokes and that I keep trying to move my whole arm, my whole wrist. I'm going to bring some of these clouds down into the mountains and just gently layer some of them right over the tops of the mountains. See how some of my strokes are kind of part vertical? I kind of put the brush down like this and then I swing it over to the left or blend it over to the right. So I'm going to bring some of that nice light violet down in here. Still leaving a tiny bit of blue showing, but coming right down to the mountains. And that helps the mountains look like they have like they're miles and miles away. Now I'm picking up some more white, and I'm going to go back in with the white. So I'm going back and forth. Dark grays, medium grays, lighter whites, different tones. Some are pinkish, some have more yellow in them, and so on. And I just keep going round and round until my sky looks interesting and painterly and like it has movement. And that's how clouds are in the sky. They're layered too. So painting them the way that they are makes a lot of sense. And they're also something that really looks good when you paint it in a loose and free way, because clouds are kind of loose and free. There, that's looking really nice. I'm gonna put a couple spots of white out here too, just to show a little more wave action. So I stood back and looked at the painting, and I need to work on this part here. That needs some more definition, so I'm going to get turquoise green and deep yellow and titanium white. I'm going to put some nice, pretty, fresh green brush strokes that come up and overlap the ironwood trees. I'm going to have them overlap everything. So they're overlapping the water, the beach, the ironwood trees. We'll have them come right down here. Look at those nice brush strokes, lots of texture. Gouache looks so great when you do things like that with it. It just gets better and better. The more you layer, the better it gets. Now I'm going to take the same color. I'm going to add lemon and white to it. So I'm making a lighter version of the same color, and I'm going to go over what I just painted. Needs more yellow, with a few smaller brush strokes. I don't want it to get too busy, but I definitely want it to look like there's a bush growing there. Now you see how this dark comes across here and it kind of stops? We need to connect it underneath this bush. The darks are the glue that holds your composition together. So you need to have them. So I'm going to connect it like this. I'm just going to kind of put a line of it under here. Where if I put it between the green and the red, now I'm going to go back and pick up this lighter green color, and where I brought it up into the greens, just blending that a bit while it's still wet. We're going to put a few final finishing touches on this painting. So I'm going to get some lemon and titanium white. And I just want to put some nice bright yellow, really bright, right here. And I'm also going to put some of that right in here. Just kind of brightening up the foreground ever so slightly with this beautiful bright yellow. And now I'm going to get turquoise and deep yellow. I'm going to put a nice warm stroke of that here. So how do I decide these colors? I sort of stand back and squint down and look at my painting, and I kind of try to ask myself, where do I get stuck? Do I get stuck anywhere? And if so, why am I getting stuck? Is it because it's something that needs to be knocked down, or do I need to emphasize some other color in another place? That can go either way. So brightening the foreground makes the background seem duller without you even doing anything to it, for instance. I really like the spots of ultramarine blue through here. And I feel like I could use another brush stroke of bright turquoise. So I'm going to get cyan and turquoise green. And some titanium white, and I'm going to put a nice stroke of that back here. And there's that mark that I made that I want to cover up. So I'm just going to paint right over it with this beautiful turquoise. Ooh, that looks pretty. Makes me want to go swimming. Just felt like the blue in the background needed to be a little bit darker. Again, it's the layering. Really looks great. I'm just softening that edge with just some plain water. I rinsed my brush off and now I'm just softening it with some water. And I think in my little cove here, I need to have some Naples yellow and magenta. Just a few strokes of that really makes it look like a tropical sea cove. This color is kind of like a salmon color, so I'm going to layer a little bit of that on here. Yeah, that looks really pretty. In my rocks here too, I'm going to add another section of the bright ultramarine. Ultramarine and a tiny bit of permanent magenta. Just to make it look like there are a couple more pools of water in here. Little tide pools. So the viewer can think, oh, I want to go down to this little beach and get in the water there. Maybe go out for a swim and look in these tide pools. And to create the illusion of tide pools, you just have to put a little bit of this nice blue, and it looks like there's a little pool of water reflecting the sky. I think I made the highlight on the ironwoods maybe a half value shade too light. So I'm going to go back in and layer over it with some vermilion and deep yellow and titanium white. And that's a mixture of magenta and ultramarine, so a real grayed down color. But I just want to put a warm gray green. See how that looks. I added more magenta to it. It's too yellow. The highlight's pretty, but it's just a bit too light. The very last thing I want to do is add a little bit of brighter, lighter turquoise back here. Really create a nice glow. And here. And over here. Beautiful. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed painting Kailua Beach.